Alright guys, hope you're back again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far after stellar starts to this stage for OpTic, Texas and Atlanta FaZe, and less than stellar starts for Toronto Ultra and certainly the New York Subliners. Questions have been raised: how close can OpTic get to FaZe when they get back to a LAN environment? Their record so far this season is not especially good, but definitely comparisons have been made between the respawn prowess of OpTic Texas and the respawn situation of Atlanta FaZe. Scump says that those that don't believe that OpTic are especially close to FaZe are pretty delusional, and as aBeZy says, you can't fix stupid. For a month and 20 your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. First of all, I thought it was cool on the breakdown last night. They got Flames on to talk about his story and also just to discuss Gorillas in general, because this team has a very reasonable shot right now of making it to the World Championship. They have good points on the board from their back-to-back top sixes, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm looking at this league. Boston are highly vulnerable. Vegas, they look pretty bad right now. Ravens, you never know what's gonna happen with those guys. Miami on LAN, I mean, yeah, we know how that tends to go. And Minnesota Rocker, I still think like the AR duo over there is a massive question mark, even though Standy has really delivered in the last couple of series they played on the SMG side. But many of these teams, despite having made changes, some of them are in a questionable position. Gorillas have no doubt improved. Surge have no doubt improved with their changes, and arguably that's all you gotta do when the other teams around you are regressing massively. So Flames is a great come-up story, and you know, wishing the best for him in his in obviously a very easy team to root for, I think, right now. That Flames and Estriel duo is getting a lot of gas, and for good reason, in the league as it stands, and I think they're honestly really good players. Estriel is genuinely like a really exciting player to watch. I haven't seen enough from Flames yet to say what I think his career is going to do, but Estriel, I've been impressed by his impact basically from day one, and even Flames giving gas to his coaching stuff and saying that the coaches are putting in a lot of work, they're trying their best to get us in the best possible position, and they got a couple of big victories in the last couple of series that they have played. This was Team of the Week, by the way, as well. Drazah was on it from FaZe, tough to say no to that. Stanley had a great week on the Minnesota Rocker. Flames is here, and then of course 0-4 as well. So yeah, quite the cast, I suppose, really, for this week of online CDL matches, and long may that potentially continue. There was also this from Joe Thieves, from, well, also at Gwyn as well, because there has been talk. Who is using Sound EQ? Who's using ATS? What's going on? Are teams actually breaking GAs, or is it just a theory from some of the pros that many of these guys are breaking GAs? ReeaL is presumably joking here, obviously, but we know that Sib said outright that he thinks that Seattle Surge are using the cheese, even though 0-4 on the flank last night denied it and said, no, I'm not using EQ, nothing like that. Miami Heretics, well, the theory was that they might have been watching yesterday's series against OpTic. There was discussions as to whether they might have had some Sound EQ cheese going on. It's always difficult to say, isn't it? But you see certain moments of players making certain plays, you think, damn, did he hear that guy? Or did he only hear him because he's got the Sound EQ turned up to the absolute maximum? Auto tack sprint as well, or even single tap to sprint. There's always a debate on that. And even when, you know, I think Scrappy thought that aBeZy was using it last year, or at least in December, and he kind of revealed it back in January. Apparently, at least aBeZy said that he wasn't using it. So even though you think you can tell watching the POV, you can't necessarily, although who knows who's right. Like, you're never going to know until you can actually see the settings, but the CDL ain't watching that, baby, so who even knows? But yeah, that's what ReeaL has to say from the Miami Heretics side. There was also this discussion between TJ and Drazah, because like Drazah's been grinding the game. He did at the start of the game BPL 8, and it's really tough to see who exactly stops FaZe in this current form. As I said earlier today, they're not entirely invulnerable. They did lose a map to the Subliners, but they lost an entire series to Los Angeles Gorillas last stage, and that didn't matter when they turned up to LAN and won it anyway with, you know, reasonable comfort in the end in the grand finals against OpTic. So, and Drazah, obviously CEO of OpTic, whatever you want to say. It's going to take quite some performance to knock FaZe off their perch, but then again, is now the time in the season you want to be peaking? Not necessarily. You want to peak at the end of the year. It's okay to peak now, but it's usually rather likely that a team that is in their best form at the present time, which they are, will have some sort of a fall off at some point. That's not even necessarily their fault. It's difficult to maintain being the best team, especially when everyone else is watching every single thing that you ever do. And there was multiple times in previous seasons when the OpTic Dynasty, for example, were absolutely dominant at roughly this time in the year, but when it came to the final event of the season, which was sometimes the World Championship and sometimes wasn't, because back in the day it used to be in March or whatever, but you know, there was teams that do well at certain parts of the year don't necessarily have the ability to maintain that over time, and usually they'll have some period where they're not quite as dominant as they presently are. That is my assumption on FaZe, that maybe at some point during Major 4, they look somewhat less scary than now, but I still feel like, you know, they are the big favourites for the final events of the season. And if there is one team in best position to knock them off their perch, it's probably got to be OpTic Texas as it stands. Speaking of Dotty Temp though, because he said yesterday, look, someone's got to kill this Kenny guy, you guys simply can't do it. Kenny's like, I'm bad at start making some calls, and actually Temp had some interesting interaction, shall we say, because, you know, this guy, Smooth Brain, says in the replies, this coming from the guy who was the anchor of the league 2 years running and only knows how to crybaby cheese. No one wanted to play with you or you'd be in the league. People did want to play with me, he says, and I'm not going to read the rest of that. And then obviously he was asked the question about why you were in challenges then, because was there a CDL offer or whatever. We know the debate about this. And then as basically Temp says, was I playing for kills here? I was the best on my team by far, he says. And he actually puts this out here, of course, from, well, this is last year MW2 when, this of course is when they made that comeback versus the Los Angeles Thieves last season on that hotel harpoon, which is, you know, certainly gone out of history to some extent. So it was interesting. Replies, I'm sure, from Dotty Temp. Look, he's going to try and get back into the league at some point. Hasn't happened this season. It's probably not going to happen from now to the end of the season. But there is an argument to say, you know, what if you put Temp onto Subliners? How does that change their team? You know, I'm not sure it moves the needle massively, but it's something to at least think about, given that Sib has not had the best time lately and has been getting roasted left, right, and centre. Couple of KD lists to look at here. The overall KDs so far this stage. Cells at a 1.25, you know, why am I not surprised? Scump at a 1.19, Predator 1.17, we talked about him earlier today playing especially well. Nero is still up here, Skyz is still up here, but those two teams have not been in the same ballpark, I would say, as certainly OpTic and FaZe, and even Toronto to some degree. They at least tend to beat the teams they're meant to beat, whereas Subliners don't necessarily, whereas they did get punished by FaZe bad the other day, Toronto did. In hardpoint, Cells at a 1.27, Ken, Drazah, Skyz and CleanX up at the top of the list. Search and Destroy, smaller sample size here for Flames, but he does have a 2.1 in search so far, which is actually pretty wild. Envoy gets back to some sort of near the top of a KD list here. It's probably not going to happen for Hardpoint anytime soon, but he did have a good series the other day, but his search has been good. Cell is here again, by the way. Is he here for control as well? Let's have a look. No, he's not. He actually is out of the control one. Scrappy tops the control list, then HyDra, Pred and Shotzzy, and Flames again in 5th. So, sure, small sample size for some. By the time we get to the end of the major, we'll have a better picture, and also it depends who you play is another important point. But OpTic already have played FaZe this stage. They competed very well with them on the first weekend of the game, and they probably should have won that series, right? They played maps that they were not especially favoured on, but they had advantages in multiple of those games, and they squandered the opportunity. In the grand scheme, it's not going to matter that much, because OpTic are still in prime position to probably win their next 3 series. I think they play Boston, they play Thieves, they might play like a Rocker or Gorillas, something like that anyway. So OpTic have a pretty good run, I think, from now to the end of the stage. I don't think they play any more particularly challenging series. Yeah, I just checked. It's Boston Gorillas next weekend, or this upcoming weekend, and the weekend after is Los Angeles Thieves to close out the stage. So interesting games to see, but OpTic should be fine to go, you know, 6-1, 5-2, get a top seed in the winners bracket, and not have to worry about playing FaZe for quite some time to come. So that's no problem. The issue is that they've lost to FaZe again, and what that means from like a mental compromisation perspective, when they might be concerned internally that can we actually beat these guys? So understandably, during the FaZe series, during the OpTic series, there's comparisons drawn between OpTic's play, especially in the respawn modes, and FaZe's play in those modes, and just how their teamwork is matching up. Because if there is one team that has been the closest to FaZe this year, despite not beating them, at least in recent times, it's obviously going to be OpTic Texas. Toronto haven't been close to them now for a couple of months, despite beating them comfortably way back at Major 1, but that feels like a long time ago and in a rather different game when the map set was dramatically different to what we have today. So Scump and Methods were kind of commenting on people saying that, wow, why are you guys comparing OpTic to FaZe? They're not even close type thing. Zinni says, you know, they're pretty stupid to make that take. But Scump says, look, let's be real, there are comparisons here to be drawn.
Stop comparing OpTic's hardpoint to FaZe. Okay, I understand that people like to just shut off their brains and spew. Yes, but
see, we can't
every single hardpoint that we've played FaZe has been within 10 points.
Listen, man, there's nothing that we can do about stupid people.
Every single hardpoint is within 10 points. And against everyone else, it is just stoppages. I mean,
I picture those few chatters, kind of like the Ed, Ed and Eddie characters. The third butter toast. I mean, stupid fuck. Sorry, that was harsh.
So until OpTic actually beat FaZe, this is always a conversation that's going to be had. Because while I think that Scump and Ziddy are making fair points, that comparisons have to be drawn. I mean, FaZe are surely going to lose a series again at some point, you would think, and I wonder who that might be too, if that actually does happen. But at the same time, FaZe fans and FaZe themselves are just going to say, well, look, Drazah's the CEO, they're 6-0 against you guys this season, what are you even talking about? But these are kind of the numbers as to why. I mean, like, the maps between FaZe and OpTic this year have been insanely close in the respawn modes, especially. The search and destroy phase have had a bit of an advantage. That's one of the reasons why I think OpTic keep on playing this high-rise search and destroy, to try and get more confident on that map mode combination, certainly when they turn up to LAN and presumably play FaZe again at some point, which you'd think they will at the upcoming major. So FaZe are still definitely a step ahead, but if there is one team that has the chance, it's got to be OpTic at the present time. Can New York do it at some point? Maybe. Can Toronto get back to that point? Maybe. But I think it's going to take some regression from FaZe. Like, I don't see Toronto or New York beating FaZe if FaZe keep playing at the levels they're currently playing at. FaZe would need to regress, and Toronto theoretically would need to take some steps forward to beat FaZe. I think that OpTic, if they play their absolute best cards, they don't start slow in hardpoint games as they have done against FaZe. They actually remember how to play proper COD when it comes down to crunch time, that FaZe have been much better at than OpTic this season. I think that OpTic at their peak performance can beat FaZe at their peak performance, whereas I'm not sure I've seen enough from other teams to say that that could be the case as it stands. But FaZe's record in the last year is pretty disgusting. 33-8. They've never lost back-to-back games, which is also pretty absurd. 3 appearances in finals. Obviously, they've won, you know, a couple of events as well. They won recently and then back in Boston last year, but I guess technically that's outside of the 365-day window. 3 separate 6+ win streaks and undefeated against most of the league, which is kind of absurd. The only teams they have lost to in the last 12 months are OpTic, of course, last year, Ultra New York this year, and Gorillas this year, which is kind of ridiculous. And the league currently looks like this. So Toronto are still in 2nd place in the overall season standings. FaZe are bringing a bit of a gap there now at 23-4, 335 CDL points. Subliners are quite a way behind. And then with Minnesota Rockers' victory this weekend, they reverse swept Thieves to make it happen. They're now, well, they're still at 120. It's not a done deal that Rocker are going to make champs, but that was a really nice 10 points to get, because all of a sudden for Thieves, throwing away that 10 points by getting reverse swept, now they're at 90 still, Ravens at 95, Surge, Legion, Gorillas, man. The fight for the World Championship this year is honestly kind of crazy. Like, genuinely, any of the bottom 8 teams can still make it. Apart from maybe Boston. I think Boston, it might be a bit of a stretch too far, because they've not shown me anywhere near enough to believe that they can actually make this comeback happen. They would need to get a top 4 minimum, I think, in an event from now to the end of the year to make this work. Probably they're too far behind. But of the other 7, I think that basically anything can happen here. So very much interested in your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.
Could have sworn these how they look like, dude. I could be brain dead though.
What the f is that? I have no idea.
It might be a good drawing, and we could just be on Mars.
What? What? I choose the wrong one?
Oh.
Alright, now we're trolling.
On drugs. Bro,
We're
I put Ram.
trolling.
Wait,
This
yo,
guy's
would you
on
Ram?
We're trolling.
Wait, yo, would you?
We're trolling.